All right. Fantastic. I am so pleased and excited that you are here. And I hope that you will click share and tag a few folks to join us in today's discussion. While we are ramping up, because we've had some technical difficulties with Zoom. And so I want to thank you for your patience. We are broadcasting live through Restream, which is broadcasting live to both the Marcus R. Holmes page and the Love and Stuff page, as well as the Twitch TV channel and the Zoom channel. So you can watch this live on any of those platforms. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your continued support in tuning in to Love and Stuff. Last week, our show had over 4,800 views, and just over 1,000 of you watched the entire show. And so how heartened we are from the Love and Stuff production team that our content is resonating with some of you to the extent you're watching the entire session, and resonating with many others that are interacting with the content, coming back to the Love and Stuff page. We would just ask that you will continue to share. We want to get our shares up because that's what helps our content go viral. We know that our content is being watched in a number of places, and we appreciate that, but we want to amplify that voice across those many different geographical places, if you will. So folks in Poland and folks in Nigeria and Kenya and South Africa now, and folks in Mexico and in Venezuela, and folks in the UK, folks in India, folks in Paris, folks in Spain. We want to increase our audience and our reach in those areas. And so I'm very thankful that you are joining with us there. I'm going to bring in my guest very shortly. I think he is ready to come in. And just before he does, he is a gentleman that I respect quite a bit. Detroit born, but living abroad, and we'll talk a little bit about that. In another state, sometimes abroad might seem like far away, but it is a distance. And an upstanding pastor, preacher, person. And I want to definitely talk to him as we continue our Father's discussions as we lead up to Father's Day. Some of you, hello, Marilyn Hamilton, Tasha Green, Christina Smith. I hope all of you will click share and tag some folks to join us in this discussion. It is yet another part of our Father's Day discussion, and I'm just trying to track on a couple of different devices. Beverly Johnson has joined us. Thank you so much. And so I will bring in Darren Williams to join us. Hey, sir, how are you?
I'm well this evening. Can you hear me and see me okay?
I can hear you and see you just fine. Thank you so much.
Good.
And thank you so much for joining us. Pastor Williams, Darren Williams, where are you? What city and state are you in so that we can tell our listeners?
Tulsa, Oklahoma for right now.
Tulsa, Oklahoma. And how long have you been out west in Tulsa, Oklahoma?
Out west,
well,
20 years. That was, and then back in Tulsa for about 2.5, a little better than 2.5 years now.
Okay. All right. So away from Detroit for almost 23 years. Is that a fair statement?
A long time away from Detroit.
Long time away from Detroit. But Detroit born and reared?
Definitely, yes.
What high school did you go to in Detroit?
Detroit. I started at Murray Wright High School. That's right, the pilot. But I finished Detroit Central High School.
Okay. All right. All right. That works. That works. And then tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about, because we're going to talk about your dad. I saw your post and wanted to
Sure.
highlight him. Before we get into that, though, tell us a little bit about your family makeup, how many siblings, that kind of
Mhm.
thing, and then we'll get a little bit more into it.
Okay, good. Yes. I am come from a family of five natural born siblings of my mother's children that I lived with. My father had two other daughters, and then one of my friends, one of our friends, came to live with us when I was in high school, and so we had an adopted brother. It wasn't an official, kind of adopting thing, but you know how we do. We
Mhm.
adopt people, and so
Yeah.
we did have a what we called our adopted brother, a single parented, female headed household. My
Okay.
mother raised all of us. Um, and interesting, we're talking about my father. I actually mentioned it too in the post that I did make on his birthday. Daddy didn't live with us,
Okay.
my father,
Hmm.
but my mother again raised us by herself.
Hmm.
And um, what other things? I guess I'm the middle child. I have a brother and sister older. These are the siblings that I grew up with, and a brother and sister who are younger than I am. I'm smack dab in the middle, and half of psychologists and psychiatrists say that the middle child is the crazy, unstable child. The other half says that they are the stable and the well adjusted child. I'm both of those.
Okay. Because I was going to
Yeah,
say, I would argue the latter.
right.
My brother, bless his memory, he was the middle child. And I would say, as it relates to
Mm,
a baseline, he was the most stable
yeah.
person, amongst the five of us, because there were five of us as well. So,
Okay.
uh,
All
uh,
right.
before we delve into more about your father, I know that you have a heart and mind for God and a heart and mind for people. And
Mhm.
so, just in this environment, because it is so charged an
Mhm.
environment with so many different things that are going on, and people, I think, want to conflate protesters with looters and
Mhm.
people that are with the cause with people that are agitating the cause. And I just want to hear briefly as briefly can be, because we're
Okay.
on learn stuff. But I want to hear your thoughts about where we are as a people as it relates to, because I think we're missing a father. And people
Mm.
go in about spiritual fathers that aren't your father and all of that kind of thing. But I believe God designed us to be far more communal than we are living out. And in
Sure.
that community, we have fewer fathers who are gatekeepers. And so we don't have a Martin Luther King Jr. per se. We have other leaders, but we don't have a voice that's unifying us around what we should be doing. What are some of your thoughts?
Um, that's a whole lot. You threw a whole lot at me on that one. I'll say just a couple of things, and I'll go backwards to the last part.
Hmm.
Um, I do certainly agree with you in terms of a unified voice and even figure, even though I think there there should be one because there is one present. And if we talk more about that specifically, then okay. However, one of the things I'm extremely concerned about is, as I talk to so many of us, is that too many of our people don't say that we don't need a leader. They don't think that we need somebody that can bring us together. And of course, I'm patently against that idea, and for
Hmm.
several reasons. And just one of those reasons is this, and it's theological, but it's simple. God created us to follow Him,
Hmm.
and the only way that you can ultimately follow God is that you have had to have followed the leadership of someone else in your life.
Hmm.
Okay. And so, socially speaking, in the climate that we're in, and for our efforts and where we are, I believe somebody's definitely, certainly, um, we should have somebody that is able to do that for us to bring us together. And then just a word on the general condition and a word of things that are going on. Uh, I'm glad that to a degree, more clarity and understanding is being brought in this sense, because too many times there's been an individual event that has happened, seemingly individual, and so
Mm-hmm.
there's a response to that. I think more than before, the collective understanding is that there is a whole larger systemic issue, and not just of one incident. And so, not enough yet,
Mm-hmm.
not clearly enough yet, but that is beginning to have take a greater understanding in society, and I'm really glad that that is finally happening. And so, in terms of protest and things, um, uh, I cannot condemn what is happening with protesting. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because I am a protester.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you won't see me out there doing that in terms of protests unless and until it is organized to the point that there is a strategy and an agenda and a disciplined, mobilized, and I say discipline, I mean something that has been practiced and practiced and practiced and perfected, a mobilizing effort that sends us out there. That's the only way in terms of that kind of protest that
Mm-hmm.
I will lend myself to, because
Mm-hmm.
my thinking is that that's how you actually get results. They'll hear you when you are out there, they'll see you,
Mm-hmm.
but in terms of understanding, to gain an understanding, to make a difference, something organized, something strategized, something mobilized, in my mind, to my mind, is what does that. And but I have to say it again. I do not condemn
Got it.
what is going on out there. I don't condone um, the destruction of things
Mm-hmm.
in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I do not condemn the right to protest, because, Brother Marcus, God is a protester.
Mm.
The presence of the church in the earth is God protesting.
All right. That'll preach,
And
Reverend.
so I'm,
That'll preach.
and I'll stop with that.
Let me double back to just check in with some of the folks who have joined us.
Sure,
Ann
sure,
Lewis
sure.
has joined us. Andre Green and James Arnold, Godchildren Cropper, Rondell Murray, Lynn Lipsy, Creed
You're on
Baker,
that.
uh, Teresa Marshall, Valencia Etner, Tyrone Pickens, our senior associate producer, J. Gerald Harvey IV, Corey Reed, Willie Rogers. So thank all of you for joining us. We're here talking with Darren Williams, Pastor Darren Williams, on a number of different things. But we've been doing some shows around fathers, and as we lead to Father's Day, we're trying to have more discussions with fathers. Long term, we do want to have some discussions with Black men and their emotional literacy, which I think is an important discussion. So we'll keep you tuned in for that, because we can certainly use
Amen.
great voices to help us elevate and great facilitators to help us move through that. You said in your post kind of a happy birthday to your dad. It looks like he would have been 80 this year.
That's right. Yes.
And you described him as a cool dad. So tell us about your dad, what made him cool, and, have swag, or whatever the things that you thought of your dad. And what do you think those things meant to you as a young lad, a young boy, having a cool dad?
Mhm. Mhm. Actually, let me back up first, since I don't think I said to you how appreciative I am for you to have invited me and to allow me the space to be able to share here. So blessings on you, and thank you
My,
for that.
my,
Daddy was cool, um, because one, if you come out of or being connected to the Detroit soil, I think makes you cool in
yeah,
a way.
yeah,
But Daddy had a way about him. His walk, And actually, if you saw George Jefferson, when George Jefferson was proud, that walk that he had where he swung both his arms behind,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was Daddy's walk.
Okay. Okay.
And he was cool like that. He was cool because he knew how to address people. He was the kind of person, he worked at downtown at Kresge's department store. He was the manager of the store. And so he's a businessman. And so, he knew how to deal with people, of course, in the business arena, but then in the business and professional, but then in the personal and social arena. Well liked among his friends, very well liked because he had soul, and soul, the kind of warmth that draws people in, So he, in that sense, he was cool because he was a music lover. And in my entire lifetime of 50 now, I have never seen any person individually that owned more records than my father did. My father had a 3-bedroom house when he died, east side of Detroit, and one entire room in that house was nothing but records and a record player. And when I say records, I'm talking about 78s, 33s, and 45s. He had, 45s. I mean, yeah, and all genres of music.
Yeah,
all genres of music, and so especially jazz and especially R&B and soul. But that was where I really saw how cool Daddy was, and that's what I think. That is what, for a young man like myself, who in Detroit could have gone in so many different directions and been so many things, what Daddy did in his love for music, and it wasn't just him, because my family, everybody in my family loves music, but it was the way Daddy loved it. That was something that gave me a perch to stand on as I was growing and developing as a young man. And so I'm a music lover too. I don't have what he has in terms of the records and everything like that.
I was going to ask you, where are all of those records? What happened to all of those records?
Of course, now I got like 5,000 pieces of music loaded onto my computer, but I don't have the records and things. Okay. But I do have the love for music, as he did.
Yeah. And you say in that post that he was principled, wise, intelligent, and stern. Talk to me about those.
He was principled because Daddy was a former military man. And so even years after having left the military, it was always, he got up at a certain time. He had a routine for his day. And if you were going to deal with Daddy, you dealt with him on his schedule. Because for him, life was not haphazard. Life wasn't just go with the flow. That there was an order to life for him, and so his order of life was principles were about his order to life. He was a wise man because at the time, because there was a long time when we didn't have any contact with my father, and at the time, he decided that he was going to come back into our lives, and part of that has to do with how my brother and I, how the Lord used us to lead him to the Lord. But he did not force his way in. He very carefully and calculatedly entered or re-entered our lives, because we were older teenagers then. I was 16 in high school. My brother was 17. And so the way that he made himself present again with us was a very wise thing. And then after, of course, he came to the church, there were so many ways that the other people of the church, and actually when I made the post, some of the guys from the church who, of course, knew him and remembered him, had so many things to say about them, because they would go to him seeking counsel and advice on different matters about life and everything. And I think not just what I observed in terms of his wisdom, but what other men and women too, and women, but other people observed about him being wise. The other things, principled and wise, and intelligent. Oh man, oh man. And I didn't learn this until Daddy died. That Daddy was a college graduate. I didn't know that he graduated with a business degree from college.
Wow.
But because he never talked about them things, he was not a self propagating person in any manner of means. But when you would sit down to talk to him, because what you saw, and one of the things I didn't mention, is the guy shot their cousins, had all of those cousins suits. You remember cousins? And
I do remember cousins.
And I still have one of his ties to this day from there that I actually wear. But he dressed very, very sharp dresser. And I actually believe, Brother Marcus, that you can tell some about a person's intellect by the way they dress. You can look at people and you can tell a lot about them by the way they dress. But his intelligence, you sat down to talk to him. And I remember we were at some church member's house one night. We were playing the game Trivial Pursuit. And they were asking these questions when it came to Daddy. I don't even know that he missed any one of the questions that they asked him. When it came to TV, had a historical encyclopedic memory. Tell you the name of the actor, tell you the year the film was made, all of the other supporting cast members and things like that. And just on many subjects, he was versed. And you couldn't tell it by how unassuming he was. And again, that's one of the ways that he was cool to me also, because he wasn't braggadocious. He wasn't about what he knew and all of those things. But when you found it out, you'd be like, oh my God. So yeah, that's how that was.
And you said in that post that he was stern. You said,
oh my God. Okay, which was a nice one. Me saying, oh my God, Daddy could be mean as a pit of snakes. Okay, and in some regards, he was mean. And I'm not saying this, what I'm gonna say. I'm not burning bread on my family or anything, and not making excuses for him. But my daddy got it honestly, because my grandmama was mean in the same way. Okay. But my mother was mean in the same way. It's different though how life went on and they changed. They became different people than the ones that I knew when I was a child. But Daddy was the kind of man. I'll tell you this. We were at the barbershop one time. This was the last mean episode that I saw with Daddy. Somehow or other, I had some extra cash on me. We went to the barbershop and he said we were going to the barbershop. I said, okay, because I needed a haircut. We got to the barbershop. He got his haircut first. I got my haircut and I had some cash on me. I didn't have enough to pay for my whole haircut. And so I asked, asked him for the money right there in that barbershop. Daddy cussed me out. You came all the way down here and know you didn't have money to get your haircut. And I'm like, but Daddy, of course he paid for it, but he told me about it. He told me about it. And he's that way that if he got upset and got cross or you crossed him, you're going to hear about it. And you're going to hear about it in beautifully crafted language.
Yeah. I call them four-letter words par excellence.
That's right. And he can put combinations together that you never heard before. He really could do it.
Yeah.
He really could do it.
I'm going to double back to some of the folks that have joined us, but I want you to ponder this. You mentioned that there was a long period of time where your dad wasn't in your lives or maybe not as present. I want you to talk about that time that you talk in your post about him complimenting your mom on the excellent job
Yeah.
that she had done to raise you all. So I
Yeah.
want to talk to you about how that period was and how that landed on you, not having your
Mhm.
father present. Dorian Ellis has
Sure.
joined us.
Sure.
Eric Powell has joined us. Geneva Dixon Connors has joined us. Tiff Danielle has joined us. Uh, Cree Baker says very creative, and we'll get to Pam. I see your question, Pam. We'll double back. It's kind of close to what I'm asking now, but go ahead.
Mhm. All right. Yes. And I can almost kind of remember like the activating event to why we didn't see him for a while. And I didn't clarify either. Too. I talked about my father. I talked about my siblings. My father is father to me and my brother, who is right older than me. He's not the father of my other three siblings,
Yeah. Yeah.
but my brother and me. And so growing up, it was one of those things when Mama couldn't afford whatever we wanted to do, or and like that, it would be calling Daddy, I need so and so and so and so. And it was one of those times where we called him, and I I gotta remember my older brother put me up to be the one to make the call
Mm,
this time. And so I called him, and I don't remember what it was we wanted to do, but I do remember calling and saying to Daddy, we need this to be able to do this. And his words I hear inside me right now
mm,
in response to that
mhm,
request. He said, y'all always calling, asking me for something. You don't ever call just to see how I'm doing. Do you ever care
mm,
if I'm doing all right?
mm,
That's what he said.
mm,
And that struck me.
mhm,
It struck me because a lot of different thoughts were, of course, where you ain't nowhere around, and so I had a lot of thoughts about it. But when it really settled in and registered, the humanity of the statement
mhm,
finally registered. And I was young, 12, 13, maybe at that point.
mhm,
And it did something different with me in terms of people. But
mhm,
after that episode, it was several years, 4 or 5 years,
mhm.
maybe a little more, that we didn't actually it didn't talk. Well, no, that's not true. That's not true, because when we started going to Murray Wright, we would sometimes go through downtown and stop at his store. But then, but no, there was a time when we would actually go some weekends and spend the night with him and things like that. But all of that kind of stuff cut
Mhm,
out for about 4 years, 3 years, 4 years.
mhm,
And there was a way in which it wasn't bothersome at all, because Mama was always there. Mama always did it and took up the slack. And so we didn't miss anything necessarily because of that,
mhm,
except him.
mhm,
And um, because he had not been there, it was adjustable for even not to be able to talk to him for that space of 3 years, 4 years. But I'll say this about my mother, that my mother is not like I've heard a lot of other mothers who talk to their children about their fathers who are not there.
mhm,
Mama was not one to run him down and to talk him down,
mhm,
which was such a blessing, because at the time that he did decide to come back in our lives, we didn't have to fight with what was in our minds that Mama had planted in there
mhm,
negatively against him.
mhm,
And so it was a kind of a thing where she let us have our relationship and our experience with him and see for ourselves what the situation was and what the relation could be, wasn't, or was.
mhm,
But it was it was the kind of thing where that period of he not being there, we not having fellowship with it was like, well, daddy's gone again. And so we adjusted. We adjusted.
Mhm.
We adjust. An interesting thing too. I don't know how what else may happen in terms of coming around to this, but of course, if you're looking at me, you're looking at Harold David Copeland. You're looking at my father.
Mhm.
You look at my brother. You are looking at my father because we both look like the tone of my voice, what I'm
Mhm.
talking like, all of that is exactly
And what would you say is the
like my.
single thing about your dad that you are most like, and what's the single thing that is most different?
Oh boy. um, I don't know if I sound like him or look like him most.
Okay.
I don't know, but my mother says my hands are like his hands.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Mama
What is
says
she?
that. I
Does she
don't
mean the
know.
shape? What is she? What did you understand that to mean? The shape of your hands? Okay.
The actual shape of I bought a ring. This was some years ago. I
Hmm.
bought a ring and um I had my hand on the table and Mama saw the ring and she said, "You have really nice hands. Your hands are just like your father's." She said, and so I guess in terms of just the way they look, size, and everything like that, even though my hands probably are bigger than my father's hands, a little bigger anyhow. But the way my fingers look and everything, she didn't go into detail, but she said they are like my father's hands, like his hands.
Hmm.
Um, that was you asked me to remember lessons too. I just thought about one of those lessons. Um, help me with the question. This
The
current
thing that you are
question
most
again.
dislike, that you're most
Most like.
distant with.
Okay. I don't know whether it's sound or look. Uh, most like him. It's either of those two. The way I'm different.
Mhm.
Uh, mm, uh, that's something I've never thought about before.
Okay. Okay.
Um, let me.
Ponder on
Wow.
that. Ponder on that.
Yeah, let me ponder that.
So,
Let me ponder.
so how old were you, or was it that your dad was with your mom at a period of time and then was not with her? What was that age span? And then, since there are five of you, what was that like? Was because I believe you're saying that Ken and Kanata are younger than you, correct? And
Yes.
so, was there a time when their dad was around? How? What was the family time like? And when was it that your dad was no longer present? And then for those 4 years, and what was that time? What do you think that time like was for you now, looking back at it, saying, your mom took up the slack, and so it was just something you adapted to, wanted to reach out to your father, but knew not to reach out to your father. Tell us a little bit more about that time.
Hmm. Daddy and Mama met when my oldest sister was very young, probably 2 years old, maybe 3 years old.
Okay.
Um, and after my after my older brother was born, they fell out. They weren't involved with each other for a while until whatever happened. They came back together, and then there was me.
And it was you.
But when Mama was pregnant with me, they fell out again. This was the last fallout.
Hmm.
To the degree that she named my brother after him. My older brother has his name.
Hmm.
She would not give me his name.
What did that do
That's
to you,
how
if
upset.
anything? What did that do to you?
Said again.
What did that do to you, if anything?
That has that has really bothered me.
Hmm.
That really has, because at the time, which is when I was an undergraduate, when I became intentional about my identity, when I wanted to know me,
Hmm.
and I say me, I'm talking about as an African American person. So involved in cultural studies, African studies, African American history, and things like that. I started to know about that, and realized, in terms of lineage and heritage,
Mhm.
that in terms of nomenclature, I didn't have a connection to what is my bloodline,
Mhm.
because my given last name, which my mother had at the time, was her married name. She was married to my oldest sister's father.
Okay.
She did not marry my father. So
Got
the name, Williams' name, has never been my family name,
got it.
technically
Got
at
it.
all. And
Got
so at the point where identity became important, that became an issue for me. And at the time that I went to have my name changed, I went to actually, I researched, what it would take, what was the process to have it done, and those things. Um, and I did it, I think, well, I did it while I was in Tulsa. I went to undergraduate here in Tulsa, Oral Roberts University. So I found out the information here because this is where my residence was 9 months out of the year. But I did it at the end of the school year.
it. Mhm.
And by the time I decided to actually do the process, I was back in Detroit for the summer. I had gone home for the summer, and whatever happened, I put that on the back burner
Mhm.
instead of going ahead with, legally getting my name changed. And I, I didn't come back around to actually getting it done. Thought about it more times. But by the time I gave it very serious consideration again, I was established as me.
Got it. And I just want to go back to make sure I'm following, so and make sure our community is following. Your mom's uh, married name was Williams, and that's
Mhm.
the name that
Yeah.
all of her children she gave her name, that Williams name, not even
Except
her,
my older brother.
except your
Yes,
older brother who has your dad's name. Everybody else kind of
that's
has
right.
the first husband's or her husband's name, not her
That's
maiden
right.
name.
That
Okay.
that's right. Not maiden name. We're
Yeah.
boys. We're boys. Maiden name boy. And so then the next piece to that, according to your question, is um, so my father didn't live with us. He never did.
Okay.
My youngest sibling's father, Ken and Kanata, uh, did live with us when I was, had to be 4, 5, 6 years old.
Okay.
Um, and probably for about that period, 3 years, 4 years, somewhere in that time frame, he did live with us.
Okay.
But other than that, none of our fathers otherwise
Mhm.
did live with us.
Hmm. And what do you think was the impact of that absence on you, especially? Because I mean, in that time, because you're 51, so not very slightly older than me, but so I
Mhm.
remember that time of the 80s,
Right.
right? This would have been 70s. Yeah, thank you, sir. 70s, 80s when you were being reared, and there were tons of gangs and all types of things that could have occurred and happened in that area or probably in any area in Detroit at that time. So, what was that time and space for you like?
Mhm. Especially in our area, right down the street from 2 blocks from where I live, same street. The end of my block was elementary school where I went to Bernie Elementary. The next block over, um, and then on this side we lived a dead end street. The street behind that context was where the Young Boys Incorporated, one of the biggest drug rings in the city, actually originated.
Mhm.
People who lived on down here on Monterey and then over on Martindale Street. And so I grew up right in the hub in the center of that, right down the street from us. They bred and raised dogs for fighting. Um, Down the street and over is where they were selling drugs, and of course, across the way. And so, yes, that the environment, that was the environment
Mm-hmm.
80s, 90s, just
Mm-hmm.
as you said. I knew all of these guys, all of them. I went to school with many of them, and the others I knew because it's the neighborhood. We were there together. They all knew me as the church boy.
Okay.
They didn't call me church boy. They called me by my nickname like everybody else. But very interestingly, whereas usually your friends they're trying to get you to get involved with everything that they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
those guys used to give me money to keep me from coming out there where they were doing what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the temptation of just ghetto living and having to struggle to make your way through everything. And because we attended high school, my brother and I, out of our neighborhood, um, to have a sense of protection and what gangs did and all those kinds of things. That those temptations were there, but we never succumbed to that because by that time I was saved. Now I wasn't a holy roller, so I wasn't, quoting scripture and doing all of that with them. But I knew I was different because my life was different because I had somebody living inside me.
Mm-hmm.
And so since I was saved, um, the thoughts at times had been there to get involved in those kinds of things, but there was never any draw, never any real attraction to that because I love the Lord
Mm-hmm.
and I love church.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the anchor and the grounding that actually held me. Now, to be honest, completely honest, which that's all I got. Everything I did wrong, I did it after I met Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
However, none of it was enough
Mm.
to keep me from Jesus.
Wow. That'll
And
push.
so all of the partying, all of the hanging out and, drinking and all of those kinds of things, I was saved after that because mama raised us in a believing household.
Mm-hmm.
She brought us up in the way that a parent, she couldn't give us, the economic thing. She couldn't give us the thing. She gave us what she could.
Mm-hmm.
And for my life, that was enough. It held me.
Yeah. And that upbringing led you and your brother to lead your dad into a relationship with Jesus Christ. Tell us about that.
Very true. And this event was the first after having not talked to him in that span of 3 or 4 years. We got word. I don't know how in the world, whoever it was, called us to tell us that our father was in the hospital. Daddy had been an alcoholic for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
12, 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he was entering onto the John C. Lodge freeway at some point. I don't remember the exit. He's told me, but I don't remember. And as he was emerging onto it, he and another car smashed into each other. He was in the hospital, had been in the hospital for a long time by the time we even found out. So at our church, we were junior deacons. My brother and I were my older brother and I were on the junior deacon board. And what we did as junior deacons, we would go to the hospitals and nursing homes and do visitations of the with the members of our church who were shut in. And when we learned that our father was in the hospital, we went over there to see him. And we walked in, and of course, he was surprised to see us because he didn't know we were coming. We just showed up, and we did with him there what we did with everybody, which is a brief devotional service, a reading of song service, a reading of scripture, and then of course there was a prayer time. So when we got to the prayer time, I don't know why I asked because normally we didn't. When we visit anybody, we sang, we read scripture, and then we prayed, and that was but I asked him, I was like, Daddy, can we pray for you? And in his classic, matter of fact, stern way, said to me, no, you can't pray for me. What you gonna pray for me for? No. And Brother Marcus, it was as though somebody stuck and pulled a dagger all the way across my intestinal cavity. And for years, the injury of him refusing our prayer, my prayer, because I took it personally, I took it extremely personally, because I'm the one who asked. His refusal of prayer, and there's a lot to it. I was in a CPE first unit a couple of years ago, clinical pastoral education course, and just sitting up and discussing. This was unburied after some 40 years that I carried the injury, because it wasn't even a scar yet. It hadn't even, it was still open and festering in there.
Mm-hmm.
In this CPE class, it was exposed that some of the issues that I had in ministry was from the injury of my father refusing me to pray for him.
Mm.
But he refused the prayer. And so we collected ourselves and we left. And it would have been probably 2 weeks or 3 weeks later. Very strange, because we were church going folks. Mama, you've heard it before. We thought Mama was on drugs, because she drug us to church, she drug us to choir meetings, she drug us to Bible studies, she drug us to usher board meetings, and we were on everything. Whatever we wasn't on, she was in, and she drug us. She drug us there, made us go. This Sunday, everybody else was going to church, but my brother and I was not. We decided we were not going, because we was going to have something to pay when she got back, but we decided we weren't going. So we're there at the house, and somebody's ringing the doorbell, and that's way out the ordinary, because everybody who knows us know where we are on Sunday. Mm-hmm. So this has got to be some strange person. And my brother, I'm not going to answer. You go answer. I go to the door, Brother Marcus. I look out of that window, and there is Harold David Copeland standing there in a gray 3-piece Glen plaid suit with red stripes all through. And I couldn't believe it. I yelled back to my brother, "It's Daddy, it's Daddy." I opened up the door. The first thing he said, "I come to go to church with y'all today." I almost fell out dead. So we go, and I'm going to expedite it. We go to church. 9 weeks straight, Brother Marcus. He's there every Sunday to get his son to go to church with his son. 9 weeks straight.
Wow.
When the altar call is given, my pastor does the altar call. I'm sitting there with him. He's sitting on it right here on the edge. He gets up and starts walking down that aisle to the front of the church. And it was pandemonium in the building. And so when they came down to ask, if anybody had anything to say, there was several others who had gone down to respond to the invitation. Also, Daddy said this. Daddy said, he said, "My sons came to visit me when I was in the hospital." He said, and my son asked me if he could pray for me. He said, and I told him no. And in effect, he says, and God whooped my behind every day since that day until I got out of that hospital. He says, I have watched my sons these 9 weeks that I've come to this church. He said, how in the world could I have refused what I see with them here?
Wow.
He said, as soon as I got out of that hospital, he says, I'm going to get what my sons have. And he says, he apologized from that point about refusing to pray and everything in his statement. 99 and a half just won't do.
Wow.
That's what he said.
Wow.
But yeah, so he talked about his sons. He mentioned the other young men who had come too. But his son, what his sons did. I'm here because my sons came to see me in the hospital.
You know, I love that story, and I'm so fascinated because he came to Christ and talked about his journey of being whooped every day since, but yet it took a long time for you to get to that unearthing of that open
Yes.
wound. And I guess after that point of being a junior deacon is must have been when you received a call. So
Yeah.
you received the call to ministry, yet you still had this wound. Talk to me a little bit about how you walked that journey, still having that. I don't know how you would characterize that wound. It kind of sounds like it might be some hurt, some emptiness, some void, but I don't know. And how do you walk out that step in your life and become the man that you are today? Let me just double back to say hello to some
Sure,
folks.
sure.
Evelyn Graham has joined us. Cree Baker is saying that you look just like your dad. You got his ways. Samantha Young has joined us. Pam said most of us partied.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Sam.
Andre Green says, yes, sir. Rod Hightower says, I remember when he started coming to church. Okay, wonderful.
Yes, sir.
Kimberly
Right.
has joined us. Brenda Landry has joined us. Thank you so much. All right, so here you have this open wound, and I love the way that you describe it. Just, seems like a gut cut, basically.
Sure.
And then you're called into ministry. How is that walk now, having that? What is that, first of all, and how is that walk?
Interestingly, it's not unique
Mm-hmm.
because there is what is in theological terms and in theological counseling terms what's called a wounded healer.
Okay.
And what that addresses is the fact that in terms of our humanness, there are experiences and events and relationships even that have caused a very serious injury, whether it's the rupture of a relationship, and it could be on any level. It could be on any level. And many people have, here's the other term, it's called a father wound. That something in the relationship with their father, which is so very key when it comes to ministry, because that's supposed to be where we get our understanding of the Father from.
Mm-hmm.
Our relationship with our earthly father comes through, it's supposed to come through. It's supposed to mirror at least, or point a light to what our relationship to and what our Heavenly Father is. So it's not unique. So many people have it. You have it with people in ministry, and the many instances where in the rough and sharp edgedness of their lives, they have not come to realize it. It's where the church hurt comes from a pastor to whole congregation sometimes, or individuals in the congregation. In my case, and this is true for everybody too, often you don't ever know it's there. Because with me, what daddy did that day was a, knockout punch in a way. But you leave the experience, you go to Kentucky Fried Chicken and y'all go laugh and hee haw and carry on. And the moment passes and you don't think anything is there. But it's there. So I was able to go on because the moment passed. And without staying connected to the industry, the injury mentally, life went on. I went on. And again, at the time that I realized it, my mind wasn't on it either. I wasn't in the discussion that was happening at the table. It was a discussion about hindrances in ministry. And while I was sitting at the table, the Holy Ghost said to me, that's where that is with you. And so unprovoked, unsearched, unexpectedly, the Holy Spirit brought to my mind, because my understanding is this is the time that I needed the healer.
Mhm.
Because to a degree, however you manage and gauge success, ministry had been a successful experience. Pastorate, I had a pastorate in Kansas that there was verified numerical and, more importantly, personal and spiritual growth that occurred there. Able to have very meaningful relationships with people. And so I wasn't hampered in the way of how I related to and responded to people and being in relationship with them. And so when you're able to do those things, a lot of times you think you're okay.
Mhm.
You don't realize what's going on.
Mhm.
But because the scripture said he searches the hearts and our mind, he knows what's in there.
Mhm.
And at the time when, I say it for my life, at the time when the Lord was ready both to reveal and then to heal, because I'm not like everybody, and I'll have to say this. I started to be general and say I'm not like everybody. That the forgiveness is all good, and I'll be very specific. My brother held on to issues with my father,
Mhm.
so that even by the time that he did come back into our lives, my relationship with my father and my brother's relationship with my father was very different,
Mhm.
because this is the part that I didn't say when I talked about the interim period where daddy wasn't there, and the other reason for what held me from getting involved in all kinds of crazy lifestyles. There were men at the True Faith Baptist Church who invested in me.
Mhm.
Most of them, it wasn't anything but time and a kind word. The other ones actually saw my mother was a single parent with five children, and the daddies weren't there, and they didn't make themselves fathers and daddies, but they made themselves men that we could see.
Mhm.
One of those men, Jimmy Lee Woodson, chairman of the trustee board, and I love that man like a father. He was actually granddaddy age. He was probably 60 something then when I was 20. I worked down at the church with him. And right at the time daddy started coming back to church, we were down there. I was cleaning the bathroom that day. Woodson came in that bathroom. This is what he said to me, Brother Marcus. He said to me, I see your father's trying to come back into your life. Wise man, a question. What do you think about it? Because here's the wisdom. In order to make the best approach with him helping me, he had to understand where I already was. What do
Mhm.
you think about it? He asked me. And I told him. Of course, it's blindsided because I wasn't expecting this conversation. I said, it's okay. I'm glad. Or something I said, something. He said, let me tell you something. And you know how they do, Brother Marcus. Let me tell you something. He says, if your father's trying to come back into your life, don't you charge him for anything.
Mhm.
He says, you don't know why he left, and you don't know why he stayed away. But if he's trying to come back in your life, don't you try to make him pay for why he wasn't there and why he was gone. Brother Marcus, that saved my life.
Mhm.
Not just the relationship with my father. That saved my life because that helped me. uh, I applied that to relationships with people altogether. I don't know where they've come from. I don't know where they've gone. But if people want another chance,
Mhm.
that's what it boils down to.
Mhm.
If it's in your power to do it, you do that. But there were other men who were involved, men at our church who were involved. And Rodney Hightower, who's there, you just called his name out. Rodney knows that his father was one of those men. He was one of the deacons at that church that took us in. They trained us how to be junior deacons. What
Mhm.
we knew to do when we did what we did as junior, it's because of the other men at that church, training us in the ways of the Lord. And so that was something that Woodson did that made the difference with Daddy coming back into my life. And the experience was different with my brother because Jimmy Woodson, David didn't work at the church. Woodson didn't have that conversation with him, and maybe nobody else did. And so that was probably a way, I thank God, as I'm even thinking about it now, that God was kind of dealing with whatever my wound was. And so at the time that he was ready to touch it and to heal it, to be able to make me better, and then make me be better able to minister to his people, that he did it that way.
Yeah, I think that's powerful, that God places the right complement of men and brothers to stand instead to help usher you into grace and manhood, such as is appropriate for you to be able to have a ministry of grace and reconciliation. So, I mean, Amen. God does all things well. And I hope that there are brothers and men who hear this, where they see that there are boys in their neighborhood, or boys in their church, or boys working at the party store, or boys on the corner who could just gain from the time that they spend with them and teach them small lessons. I'm saying small because it doesn't require a lion's share of your time to do that great trustee did for you, but it does require some time, and it could have a Herculean impact on the way that a young man develops and sees the opportunity to see who he is. As you talked earlier about being on your identity path through your studies of seeing who you were as an African-American male man, I'm sure that there are young men who need that same kind of catalyst to help them on their trajectory of becoming that man. So that's awesome stuff. That's awesome stuff.
And let me say this to that too. What was as important, and I identified it with the men who were there at the church. They didn't come and try to father. They just stood as men. And at 51, I see the importance this way, because fathers are men. If you show boys what a man is, fathering is extracted from that.
Yeah.
It happens the other way sometimes, that guys they want to be your dad. They want to be the father. Just be a man, Doc. Be a man. Because fathering is extracted from that. That's what I saw.
That's good stuff. I want to pivot a little bit so that you can share with us. I know I asked you about thinking on it. What are some of the important lessons you learned from your dad? I mean, there's some jewels already in this, but if you got 3, what are some important lessons that you could say, this, and this?
First one is we were with him one weekend, and we were sitting down to eat. And I remember we were at his house, and he had made some sandwiches. And I picked up the sandwich and, grabbed it with my hands. He looked at my hands. He said, "Boy, what's wrong with your fingernails?" I had dirt all under my fingernails. They was long, just nasty look. I was young. I was really young. I was a kid. Probably 9, 10 years old. He was like, "Boy, your hands ain't supposed to look like that." He stopped us in the middle of eating, got the nail clipper out, nailed the file first, cleaned out my fingernails, and kept and clipped them off, and said to me, he was like, "Ain't no man supposed to be looking like that. If you can't keep them clean, just cut them off. Keep them cut off." That was a lesson that expanded into how I kept myself groomed as a man. And now you can't tell it by the way my hair and my beard look now, but this is intentional. This is a covenant I made, that until we've got an all clear for the COVID-19 virus. I ain't taking no razor to my hair, to my beard. And it
Well,
ain't about a barbershop because I've been cutting my own for 20 years.
yeah,
So,
well, that's okay because I think Rod Hightower said, "Glad to see you're just as gray as me." So yeah,
okay. Probably grayer, man.
yeah,
Gray.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
Um, and so the lesson on the grooming and being put together, and especially when you are in front of when you're going out of your house, you gotta be together. You ain't gotta be the sharpest or anything like that, but you need to be clean, your body clean, your nails put together, your shoes need to look decent, not all run over, and all that in here, all of that needs to be put in place. Second thing, my father taught me, and it's an inadvertent lesson. I just addressed it a moment ago. It's the second chance,
Mhm.
and um, what Daddy did in coming back into our lives. Again, the lesson is there with me is you don't give up on people. And especially, and even if you're the one who's done the offending, you have to go back for the second chance. And even if they don't receive you, even if things aren't restored, relationship isn't restored, even if they don't forgive you, you take the step
Mhm.
when it's in your hands and in your power to do that. How beautiful that was. What the rest of what came out of that is, um, from that time up until the time Daddy died. Well, it's been true all along, but my other two sisters and my brother started having a relationship with Daddy during those times. But I'm the only of his children that was ever able to live with. I'm the only one he let
Hmm.
live with him. So even when I was at school, when I came back home for break, summer break, whatever holidays and everything, I was there with Daddy. And so that second chance, it was the second chance for a son who hadn't had his father too.
Wow.
And so then a third lesson. Um, let me couch it in this language. Lesson Daddy told me was to be a man, and not in the way, not those external things that I saw him do. Not how he kept his business straight. How he kept his nice car all the time. Not how everything was in order that way. No, 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 no. The lesson on being a man was when he gave my mother credit,
Hmm.
when he honored her for what he didn't do with his sons that she did.
Mhm.
That to me, and I think I said it some way like that in the post, that he was, as a man, as a real man would,
Mhm.
he taught me manhood that way.
Mhm.
Because, when the sons grow up and start doing this, that, and the other, the tendency is to take the credit, whether it's due to you or not,
Mhm.
because they're yours, because they're your offspring.
Mhm.
You want my son. Daddy didn't do that. He said it was you. He gave her that credit. A lesson of manhood there for me.
Mhm. And were you there when he gave her that credit? What did he say to her?
He ain't. He didn't say it in front of us.
Got it.
He said it to her. And that's why I think there's a whole different respect for it for me that way. Because I don't know what the rest of the conversation was. Mama related. Mama related. It through tears, she said it because it moved her so deeply.
Mhm.
But I respect that he just did it with her because it was her that he offended by not being there with his sons.
Mhm.
And so, whatever our relationship with him was, there was a relationship, a breach with them that he needed to address with her. And he took that time to do it. And when some of what he said about what his sons could have been doing or not doing, he said the day he received the Lord, believed on the Lord at church, when she said what she said, it mirrored each other. It was him saying it more than one time.
You mentioned also in that post about your dad hearing you preach for the first time. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Wow. Man, now that'll tear me up, Brother Martin, if I start talking about that.
Well, let me double back to that because I think I got 2 tear-ups and I don't want you to press your button and click it off.
Okay.
I'll come back to that. We're doing a series of shows on fatherhood. Key to it in my mind of strategizing, I've always thought of Darren Williams, because we've had such rich inbox talks. You're on the other side of the country, but we've had some really rich inbox talks, and even, prayers of getting you back to some of the churches here, just because I think you would be a great pastor for this area, but God has his own plan. But in my strategy of thinking about fathers and brothers, because I know that there are so many fathers and brothers and sons that are broken, that have that visceral kind of scab or opening that you described, but they haven't gotten to a journey where they can hear the revelator open up and give them revelation about how they can get healing in that. We're going to have a series of discussions. And like I was thinking of you and James Williams, who's here, and some other folks in the psychology arena as well, to help in those conversations. What would you say to brothers? We're going toward Father's Day. What would you say to brothers who, like you, were able to survive, whose lives were saved, even as you characterize it by that trustee Woodson, saved their life, but they still never had that connection back to their father? They didn't get to live with their father as an adult man. What would you say to them about still carrying that grace forward for that father, even if he never asked for it?
Mm-hmm. Now that's quite a question. But the only way I can respond to that is that, and you invoked it, you said grace. God is so wise that God has already made an allowance for that. He does it centuries ago. Last book of the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, Malachi, last chapter of the book, last 3 verses. The prophet says this, speaking for God: in that day I will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the land with a curse. So the grace for the turning, the grace for the restored relationship, the grace for atonement in relationship, God has already covered that. I recognize it as being there for my father and I. So I would say to men now, even if you don't know the Lord, even if you don't know Christ, that because God has provided the way for it, you have to open yourself to it. And it's the same for any relationship. When you meet a new young lady, you have to open up yourself to the possibility of what is there. You meet a colleague, a person that you may go into business with. You have to open yourself up to what the potential is. Very same in relationship, but more responsibly if there is a relationship history or connection before the present moment. You open yourself because essentially it is what God is doing. And we have to be open. We have to be open for that.
Okay. I'm going to go to some of the comments before I get my last 2. I don't know if they're tearjerkers for real, but.
Okay.
Sherman Redden says, Reverend S.L. loves this brother. And when he says.
My man, that's my man right there. What's up, Reverend S.L.?
Okay. All right. Gregory Brown has joined us. Samantha Young is saying, wow. Christina Smith says, mentorship, ministry. Amen. Craig Whitney Davis has joined us. Thank you, sir. Great subject. Thank you, sir. Mary F. Jones has joined us. Thank you so much. Benjamin Byron says, great series. I'm hoping that more brothers, Benjamin, will tune in. I think it is really needed in this time. I really believe in my heart that we're supposed to be a far more communal society, especially African American, but I'm African American, so I would have some bias to that, right? But we're supposed to be a far more communal society, and we have gotten our feet steeped into this rugged individualism. I'm going to handle my success, my conquest. I'm going to handle my home. I'm going to handle my property, my investments, and the rest of the world can go to hell. But I don't think that's how God designed it. And it certainly isn't what I recall of my upbringing in the 70s, because I can tell you there are any number of fathers, many of them that are in heaven or on the other side, who had the same express permission to whoop my tail. And those wouldn't be the words they would use. But I would get a tail whooping from everybody on the block, and then get it when my parents got home. It was because everyone had a sense of community, that we all belonged to each other. And that's what's missing. Right. And if fathers are to be gatekeepers, and I know mothers have done an outstanding job, as has Darren Williams' mother. They've done an outstanding job of being gatekeepers, but if fathers can step in to be stewards of faith and gatekeepers, what a difference we might have among our young men and among our women, who some of which are settling for young men that have this rugged individualism. That's my thinking when I think about the series, and I think about the love for father and brothers. I remember many of the same lessons that Darren is talking about, Pastor Williams is talking about. My dad said, you're going out there, you're representing me. So you got to be clean. You got to be neat. You got to stand up, speak up, and then sit down and shut up. Say what you got to say and get out of the way. And he had all of these different sayings, and some of them were not just sayings, because those were things I watched him as a man. That's right. He was an early riser, like you said, your dad. My dad was even getting up early and cleaning the house. And I'm like, you cleaning the house again? He would clean it every day. And then if I cleaned, he'd say, you call that cleaning? He had a way about him that things had to be in order. And just think about how different life would be if we had more men of grace who might not even be your necessarily biological father. That's right. Would impart to you these moments of manhood through what they watch and see. So we're hoping this series helps to get people thinking about that. And we get you thinking about, I got 3 boys down the street who don't have a dad. And that's enough to think about, that how can I invest in them the way Trustee Woodson invested in Pastor Darren Williams? If you can just think about it. You might get to doing some action, but you got to get to strategizing about it. Do you have a responsibility to these young men who you might regard as knuckleheads? Is there any room in your life for responsibility to them as a part of your community, as a gatekeeper for the entire community? Can you just think about it?
Yeah.
Can you think about someone who's like Pastor Darren's brother, who maybe didn't get the opportunity to resolve some of those issues? So what can you do in the way of facilitating healing where people haven't, for whatever reasons, resolved issues? If I can get you thinking about it, maybe we can get some ownership about how do we reclaim neighbor by neighbor and block by block the community value, the communal value of having gatekeepers present in our world, especially in the African American diaspora. Because then when we start talking about looting, we'd have conversations about how you intelligently go and strategically go about looting, if that's what you're going to do, or go about rioting, if that's what you're going to do, because you'd have the gatekeepers having already we call it persuasion, have already warmed you up to what activism in your community looks like. If I can just get people thinking about it.
Thinking, yeah.
If I can get people,
because the first revolution is changing your mind.
Yeah. Who is the leader? Who is the expressed leader of our movement, if I can just get people thinking about it,
yes.
then I think the series on fathers and sons would be helpful. If just one person walks away and says, you know what, I'm going to do this little bit, you don't realize in showing somebody else the little bit that you're showing what you're doing. You heard Pastor Williams said, that saved my life. Now, I don't think Trustee Woodson was intending to save your life. Maybe he was. But in that small time of saying, don't make him pay for it, was saving your life. Imagine the wisdom that we could impart in some young brother or and sister, because women need to see a man. Then they'll know how to mark another man and say, oh, he's a man like what I've seen, or he's a man unlike what I've seen. I'm not going to fool with it. So we're training the women as well about what a man looks like when we're being a man, right?
That's
so
right.
They know what to look like. Is he a provider? Is he a man of faith? Does he have a constitution about himself? Is he principled? Is he stern? Is he intelligent? Is he sharp? Is he a good dresser? All of the things that we're living them out, it tells daughters what they don't have to settle for, right?
That's right.
And all of these things are byproducts of just getting maybe some people to think about it. Maybe.
Yeah.
So that's what all these theories are about, Brother Benjamin Barnes. So I hope I sold you on that to come back, because we're definitely going to have Pastor Darren Williams involved in that, because we really want to give brothers a safe space to just be, and to not feel like they got to have it perfect. And that's why I think Pastor Williams has been excellent having you on, because having gone through some of the things you've experienced, God still saw to it that you would be able to be a success. And not only by your own measure, because I know there are tons of pastors who have their own measurement of success that I don't know if it aligns with what Jesus said at all, but to have impacted people's lives and grown numerically, because God would want the church to grow, right? And He want the lives of the people to be impactful such that their work and witness would grow, right? And so God made it that you would have a measure of success. And so it's important that we see these successes in our community. Important to me that we see him. So he'll be along that journey with us. Okay, so I'm double back into the stuff that I think might be hard, and I don't know. Isaiah Coleman is joining cousin Raina Harris. Hey, Raina, thanks for joining. Bernard Harper, thank you, sir. Thank you both for joining. I hope you'll click share, all of you that have joined, and tag someone in the discussion. I have the privilege of talking with Pastor Darren Williams. I hope you'll go back and watch it from the beginning and share it, especially with brothers. We're talking as we move toward Father's Day in a series of fathers and sons and brothers type shows. So I'll open it with this. You know, there are a lot of similarities in what you're telling, but I think it's because of men of that age. My dad would have been 90 this year, so just probably 10 years older than your dad. Came from the South, was in the Army. And all of those things bring about a certain principled way, right? They're more stern, and sometimes they'll say stuff to you and it'll hit you right in the heart. And then later you'll be like, but he was right.
Yeah.
And so when I was younger, my dad experienced a church hurt to the extent where he left our church. And he watched other deacons, other men in the church become deacons who were not faithful to their wives. And some people who had a certain status in society, but maybe didn't have a certain relationship with God. And he was about being real 24/7. That's who he was. So he became disenchanted with the church. And so he tried in his own way, I think, to discourage me from pursuing singing, especially in the church, because he said to me, what are you going to do when they stop clapping for you? I said, I'll keep singing. He said, no, what are you going to do if they hurt you really bad? But what he was really doing was telling me his experience and how he handled it. I didn't know how to reconcile that at that time. He was trying to protect me in the best way that he knew how, and probably protect himself so he wouldn't catch a case if somebody had hurt me.
Right.
But for years, I thought, well, you're crushing my dream. You're keeping me from doing the thing that I want to do. He would tell me things like, you're too intelligent too smart to just be a singer. You can do that in your pastime. You could do this. You could be anything in the world you want to be. You put your pants on one leg at a time, just like any white boy out there, but you're smarter than every one of them. This is stuff he would tell me because he was conditioning me not to be hurt, he thought.
That's right.
He would tell me, stop taking my food out there and feeding people on the street. You will feed a poor cat out there with my food. What he was telling me is, you have a heart for people, but people won't always do you well. And I had trouble reconciling his method and message because I didn't understand it. It was opposite of who I am. I am a person who would give the shirt off my back. I am a person who would help anybody. And sometimes I've helped people who punch me in the eye. And after they punched me in the eye, not physically, but after they did something to me, I helped them again. And his way was to protect me from that. And so I didn't reconcile that until many years later. And I'm like, oh, you were trying to do that. Oh, you really had a good intent. Maybe the message or the method didn't land at the time, but I'm still here and it's by the grace of God. So having said that, I wanted to ask you, because a part in your post, you said, my heart never forgets. Can you tell me when you said, and then I'll let you close with the sermon. So if either one tears you up, just cry on through it, brother. Cry on through it. But you said, my heart never forgets. What do you mean, my heart never forgets?
Yeah. Let me, before I do that, the question about how we are most unlike my father and I.
Okay.
The discipline and keeping everything together and in order. This guy, not that way. I have to say, too, somebody mentioned mentorship. That's what they got out of what I was saying. Let me say this, that in familial relationships within families, mentorship does not factor in. Discipleship is what occurs in familial relationships. A lot of people confuse the two. Here is a distinguisher in those two. Mentorship has a goal and design to develop people to be successful just like you. Discipleship goal and design is for people to see you just as you are, to get from you just what you are, but to develop you to be just who God intended for you to be. Mentorship has itself in mind. Discipleship always has the Lord in mind. Mentorship is about success. Discipleship is about God's purpose. And so I had to put that there. Let me say this other thing too about my brother, because I don't want to have painted this terrible, horrible picture of my brother. The only point in that was that our roads and our experiences, especially in terms of our relationship with my father, was different. Let me tell you who my brother is today. My brother is far more successful in this way, because my brother is married for what will be, I think in September, like 30 years.
Wow.
One wife.
Wow.
For that long.
Wow.
My brother has raised 2 children who have not seen or been in any kind of trouble at all in their lives. My brother's daughter's baby daddy, y'all know what that is, was killed. But even before he was killed, my brother has been raising his 4 grandchildren, who all 4 of them call him. I don't even know if they know what his first name is, but Dad is what they call him. He is their father. And in a wonderful way. And I don't know where he got it. I don't know where he's seen it. But I know that my brother is the kind of father in the way that he takes care of his household and his children. It's what I aspire to be as a father. And so, he ain't no bad guy. He ain't no, our experience was different.
Yeah.
But however he got to where he got,
Mm-hmm.
fathering became an understood and well demonstrated and practiced part of his own life. And so that with my brother. And so the story of my father hearing me preach for the first time. He was the head of security detail at the church, and so he traveled in and out of the church most of the time. He's watching the cars and everything, and so he's sometimes outside, sometimes inside. I was preaching that day. I saw him come in, sit towards the back of the church, last couple of rows of the church, and of course, I see my daddy coming in. I'm preaching. It's like, yeah, daddy here, right? And after a few minutes, he gets up and he walks out, and so I'm thinking, was it something I said? And so after church, I think we went home together. Extremely minimal conversation. I don't remember that though. I don't know if he went on home and then I came later. Anyhow, so when at some point I was cooking dinner for us after church, and I had made the Kool-Aid first. He wanted that grape Kool-Aid, so I made the Kool-Aid, took his glass of Kool-Aid out to me. He was sitting on the porch and thanked me for the Kool-Aid. As I'm opening up the screen door to go back in the house, he was like, "Come here, boy, come here, boy, come here." I'm 20, what? No, 18, 19 at the time. Boy, come here. So I go in there and he out there, back out to the porch and stand next to me. He said, I listened to you and I was in there today. I listened to you. And he paused and he said, "Boy, I didn't know you had all of that in you." And there was a pride that swelled up, not an unholy though. It wasn't a negative pride. It was the affirmation that I think every young man and young woman needs from their father exclusively. What he said about my preaching, he didn't say he was proud. He didn't use the language that we associate with affirmation. But what he said was completely full of affirmation. He said, "I didn't know you had all that in you. I couldn't stay in there. I couldn't take it." And so that has carried me. That has done more for me in ministry than all of the hundreds of people where I've preached around the world have had any good thing to say about me in ministry. None of it, even put together, equals Daddy's affirmation of me being able of what he observed and how he felt about me preaching. I don't miss him all the time. This is the close of my post. Only when my heart remembers, my heart never forgets. And I can tell that in I can tell that in a couple of ways. Let me tell you this. I was in Cancun, Mexico 1 year and enjoying myself. I came back to hotel room that night and just sitting and talking. And my father came up in the talking about Mexico and what was happening there. And Harold Copeland came to mind. And I wasn't sad at all, but I wept bitterly. I was at my sister's apartment. This would have been maybe 15, 17 years ago, somewhere in that neighborhood here in Tulsa. She lived in Tulsa at the time. Kanata was here at the time. I was barbecuing. Had a friend was over while I was on the grill, sitting there talking about barbecue or whatever it was. Harold Copeland came to mind. I wasn't sad or anything. I wept and I wept and I wept. And so what I've learned is that our hearts have a mind of their own. Our heart has its own memory. And so outside of what we cognate, outside of what is cognitive, what we do think and what we produce out of our mind, our heart has something else that it does. And when it comes to love and those we love, we have no control and understanding of that dimension of who we are. And so, whereas I'm not sitting and thinking Harold Copeland at any given unknown time, thoughts of him just resonate. It's not always tears. And the tears, again, aren't even sad tears. Because I did something what I think was healthy for myself when Daddy died. I was at school when he died. Of course, there's a whole nother piece to the story. I can't. We don't have time, I'm sure, to get to. But he was a severe diabetic, and he got sick when we were in Florida visiting my grandfather. He called me. I went into the room, distress in his voice, and went to see about it. He grabbed my arms, and he went blind, sitting right there in front of me, holding my arm. Son, I can't see. I can't see. So there's a whole big thing to this. But that sickness there in Florida, visiting my grandfather, led to his death. That was July. Led to his death that December. And I was at school. We were in finals when Daddy died. And of course, I wanted to come right home. And my pastor said, there's nothing you can do here now. The funeral is going to be finish your finals. Do what you're there to do. And we're sending for you to be here when that comes. And so, so when I think about him, that time I had to get through the exams to do what I had to do. But what I did for myself that I think was healthy was after I finished my exams, there was about 2 days before I was actually flying home. I took that time, I set it aside as my grieving moment. And, at this point, I'm 21, 22, 23 years old. And, men ain't cry. Men don't cry, all of that kind of thing. But this boy's daddy had died. And I knew that I needed to be strong. I needed to let what I was feeling in me come out of me. That's how I reasoned being strong. Being strong for me wasn't holding it in and being, not crying. For me, being strong was actually getting it all out. And so I took that time to do that, and that was a wonderful. It was hurt. Now that's where the sorrow was. That's where the tears that were sorrowful. That was mourning. That was grieving, sad grieving. Mm-hmm. These other tears that I experience now aren't that.
What are
that? Was the sad grieving.
What are these tears that you experience now? What do you think?
Okay, and I'm going to contrast. Because I did the sad grieving then, mm-hmm. These tears now are not the sad tears. These tears now, and again, this isn't the cognitive Darren that experiences this. Mm-hmm. This is the heart that says, mm-hmm. This is a relationship that ended then, but holds as much value and meaning now as when we were together, and I missed that. That's what these tears are. It's not that I wish you were here, the crazy, why you leave me. It wasn't. I'm sorry. Not crazy. I have to take that back. That it's not crazy. Because whatever people's experience with grief, whatever the experience of grief is, it is that. For me, it's not that, why did you have to, it's the, oh, how I remember. Because he's not was daddy to me. He's still is daddy. That's why my heart remembers. And so these tears are the celebration of the relationship, because the same value and meaning as when he was alive and we could be together, the same value and meaning is present, and it exists.
Yeah.
It,
If he were present today, I
oh man,
think he would be uber proud of you. But if he were present today, what do you think you would be saying to him now?
man, it's a gratitude. It's an inexplicable gratitude. Um, but it would it would still be son, because it would be questions. It would be the boy asking his daddy and not the little boy. This would be the 51-year-old
Mm.
grown man, boy in the sense of his tag and title for me. It would be the 50-year-old to the father. Daddy, what about this? Daddy, what about this? Man. So yeah, it would be the conversation. It would be the service of a son to the father, because obviously getting to this age and staying saved, the words of scripture, honor thy father and mother, they mean something different at this age.
Mm-hmm.
When honor of father and mother became a reality for me, he wasn't here. If he were here now, it would be the honor
Mm-hmm.
of a son to a father. It'd be serving a father.
Mm-hmm. Well, Pastor Darren Williams, thank you so much. This has been rich. I fully intend to have you back, as I've already said. And I'm hoping that brothers will watch this and that they will gain some of this sage wisdom. Some of it you haven't laid out and articulated in that regard. It's just been, as you described your dad having a matter-of-fact way, you've laid it out in a matter-of-fact way that people can pull gems from it. And I'm hoping that they do. My hope is that as many brothers watch this, that it sparks some thought and conversation for them, if their dads are present or not, if they are passed on, conversations that they can begin to do some reconciling, do some healing, do some identity, do some grace. So I'm going to thank you so much for being with us, and we will be having you back soon. Excellent.
My honor for sure. Thank you, man. And hey, everybody on there, thank y'all for being here and listening. Blessings on you, brother.
I think Latoya Shepherd, you must know. She says, "Hey, my Detroit brother and Arkansas friend."
What's up, Latoya? Pastor?
Yeah, Pastor Latoya. And Kelly Jackson has joined us, Ruth Wyatt, Alberta Jaworski. I said that wrong, Alberta, I'm sorry. And Charles Green has also joined us. So I hope that the tons of folks that have passed through here in Cree Baker have enjoyed it. I know I've had a great time, and I hope that people will share this widely.
Amen.
Thank you,
Amen.
brother.
God bless you, man.
Bless you. So that was Pastor Darren Williams. What an awesome, awesome brother he is. And like I said, on our journey of talking more expressly with fathers about their relationships with their fathers, their relationships with sons, their relationships with brothers, and then ultimately their relationship with their significant others, I think there is quite a bit to discuss and do. And if you're at a place in your life where maybe everything has gone perfect in all of those relationships that I named, we want you in that conversation as well. But maybe if you've experienced anything different than what you've envisioned, maybe if your hope was for something different than what you've experienced and you're still trying to reconcile it, we want to invite you to be part of that conversation where we're going to talk more candidly. It will begin off camera, and we will only have 100% of the brothers' agreement before we would go live with any of the content, because we want to create a safe space to have the right conversations that are going to, maybe, as Darren said, Pastor Darren Williams said, save your life, change your mind, change your perspective. Well, I'm with Pastor Williams. My heart never forgets. And if you've had any time with your father, any of the time that was precious to you, and maybe you're still having those moments, and if you are, I'm hoping that you're holding fast to them. Your heart does have its own memory, and it will not forget. It will long for those experiences of times and years past. And I hope that in that longing, that you will seek to create pathways and portals in your current relationships that will mirror that relationship. It won't replace it, but some of that longing and energy of that muscle memory of your heart that I believe your heart retains can be utilized to power and enhance other relationships, which in reflection will only give you greater honor for the original relationship. I'm Marcus Holmes. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode of Love and Stuff. I hope that you will help us to get to our weekly goal of 1,000 shares. 1,000 shares would be great, but 1,000 views. Last week, you quadrupled that, almost 5 times, quintupled that. We have over 4,500 views. Thank you very much. Our goal is 60 shares, but if you want to give us 1,000 shares, Pastor Williams brought it this evening, and I hope that you will share it just with every brother. Click share now and tag a brother in it by typing the first few letters of his name and tag him in this to watch it. We're thankful that over 1,000 views, which is about 25%, watch the entire show. And we appreciate any portion of the content that you enjoy. And the best way to signal to Facebook and to us that you are enjoying content is to click share. So I hope that you will click share. I hope that you will go to the Love and Stuff page, check it out. There's some great content there. And we hope that you will join us on the gratefulness journey. We will share the link for the gratefulness journey. I appreciate Pastor Darren Williams and his time, our senior associate producer, J. Gerald Harvey IV, our associate producer, Kamal Williams. And again, I'm Marcus Holmes. Have a great night.